Now, one important thing to understand before talking about positions or roles in Deadlock is that there aren't traditional locked roles like tank, DPS, or support, mainly due to the fact that in Deadlock you can build characters in a ton of different ways and get away with a lot. A hero isn't necessarily automatically a position 1 or position 5 just because of their kit alone. Instead, positions are mostly about farm priority, resource allocation, and what your job is within the team. And in today's video, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about positions and what it kind of means if you're newer to the game of Deadlock, or maybe just want a little bit more elaboration. And if you're wondering why I should be listening to this random Duck in the Internet, my name is Duck Films, a current team analyst for Rose Syndicate, and if you like Deadlock coaching or breakdown videos, then this is definitely the channel for you. So if you like what you see, do me a favor, hit that like button, of course subscribe to the channel, but without further ado, let's dive straight in. So what exactly is the positioning system? Well, positions 1 through 6 are essentially a hierarchy of who needs souls the most. Your position 1 gets the highest farm priority because they're expected to become your primary late game carry. Meanwhile, your position 5 or 6 might intentionally give up waves in jungle camps because their hero can still provide enormous value through crowd control, healing, initiation, or utility without needing 50,000 souls. And understanding this concept can make your team dramatically more efficient and effective in the long term. So let's talk about position 1, which is essentially your hard carry. Position 1 is your primary late game win condition. This is usually the player who benefits the most from having a massive amount of souls. Their job isn't necessary to participate in every single fight. Their job is to scale as efficiently as possible without giving up important objectives. That's a huge distinction. One of the biggest mistakes most players make is assuming that everyone should constantly group once the laning phase ends. But if your position 1 spends 5 minutes running around the map looking for fights instead of farming, you are potentially delaying your strongest hero's power spike. Instead, the position 1 should be constantly asking where is the safest and most efficient farm available right now. That usually means catching side waves, clearing nearby jungle camps, rotating into another lane, and constantly creating pressure while accumulating souls. Ideally, you're doing multiple things at once. You aren't just farming a side lane, you're pushing that lane for far enough that somebody on the enemy team eventually has to respond, and now you have created pressure while simultaneously increasing your net worth. And that pressure can create opportunities for the rest of your team. If the enemy sends somebody to stop your position 1, your team might temporarily have a numbers advantage somewhere else on the map. If they don't send somebody, the position 1 continues farming and potentially threatens a walker or another objective. That is what makes a good carry dangerous, even if they aren't necessarily fighting. Generally speaking, your position 1 generally receives the highest farm priority on the team. Your position 1 is also your mouse 1 character. These are characters like Venator, Wraith, and so forth. Now, because they have the highest farm priority, it means if your carry and your support are standing next to the same jungle camp, there are situations where that camp should probably go directly to the carry only. Not because the support doesn't deserve souls, but because you're trying to maximize the overall value of your team's resources. Imagine one hero needs another 3,000 souls to finish a massive damage item, while another hero already has the utility items necessary to perform their job. Giving that farm to the carry might drastically increase your team's fighting strength. That's the basic philosophy behind farm priority. Now, when exactly should your position 1 fight? Now, this doesn't mean your carry should just AFK farm for 30 minutes. A good position 1 needs to recognize when farming should temporarily stop. If your team gets a pick and can take mid-boss, you should probably be there. If an unstable rift is about to become contestable, you need to eventually evaluate whether your team needs you or not. If the enemy is committing 5 players to an objective, you need to decide whether joining the fight provides more value than continuing to pressure another part of the map. The difference between an average carry and a great carry is often knowing when to stop farming. The goal isn't necessarily to farm instead of fighting, it's farm until fighting becomes more valuable. This is what I usually coach and tell players, so join my Discord if you need coaching, is that the biggest game-changing event happens around the 20-minute mark. This is when the second rift appears, around 18 to 20-minute mark. So you want to get as strong as possible for that 20-minute timer, because from there, if you win that unstable rift fight around 18 minutes, depending if it's a comeback or not, of course, you can then win the fight, go to mid-boss, and if you had lost walkers or objectives before, you use the mid-boss to get the walkers you so desperately need. Now, I'm not saying don't fight or don't do anything until 20 minutes, but you still just want to generally prioritize farming if you're in the position 1 or the mouse 1, I guess role in quotations. Although there's no set specific role, farming until you're strong enough is generally the most ideal situation. Then let's go ahead and talk about your position 2, which is essentially your second major source of damage and pressure. You can label it as an off carry or your secondary core for other terminology. But while your position 1 is usually thinking about maximizing long-term scaling, position 2 tends to become dangerous a lot earlier. These heroes might be high burst spirit characters, assassin characters, mobile bruisers, or other core capable of converting a moderate soul advantage into a ton of kills. Basically, if I were to, try to show you an example for a game like Deadlock, your position 1 is like a Venator. Your position 2 could be a Pocket, because Pocket needs, a lot of farm allocation as well to get online, but he is a lot more damage in the earlier game because of Affliction, because of his high burst damage. But again, this is just a, sort of an example. Now, the job of the, off carry or position 2 is to bridge the gap between the early and late game stages. Your position 1 might eventually become terrifying, but somebody needs to make sure your team doesn't lose the entire map before that happens. That's where position 2 becomes extremely important. Your position 2 usually wants enough farm to hit an important item and ability spikes extremely quickly. Once those spikes happen, they can start becoming much more active. Instead of farming 4 consecutive jungle camps, positions 2 might clear a wave, take one nearby camp, and immediately rotate toward an enemy who is overextended. They're constantly bouncing farm, pressure, farm, fight, objective, farm. They still need significant resources, but they are usually more willing to sacrifice some farming efficiency to influence the map around. Another major responsibility of your position 2 character is creating opportunities for position 1. For example, imagine your carry is farming the left side of the map. Your position 2 starts aggressively pressuring the right side alongside your utility players. Now the enemy has a decision. Do they send players to contest the position 2 and the rest of the cast? If they do, your position 1 gets additional space. Or do they chase your position 1? Now your position 2 has an opportunity to press your objectives or force a more favorable fight. That's why these roles complement each other extremely well. Position 1 converts space into farm, and position 2 helps create that much needed space. And later on into the game, you effectively have 2 major damage threats instead of putting your entire win condition into one singular player. Then you have position 3, and this is where the philosophy starts changing a little bit. You're still a core important feature, you still need farm, but you're generally much more willing to sacrifice your own economy if doing so creates an advantage somewhere else. Position 3 is often your space creator. Again, maybe like a tank for instance. This player might occupy dangerous areas of the map, aggressively push waves, pressure objectives, initiate fights, or force enemy rotations like Abilio and Abrams and so forth. You're essentially trying to make the enemy pay attention to you, and attention is a resource. If 2 enemies spend 30 seconds chasing your position 3 around the map and fail to kill them, your team just gained an enormous amount of freedom. Your position 1 can farm, your position 2 can pressure another lane, your supports can establish map control, your team could potentially set up an objective, and that's why creating space doesn't necessarily mean getting kills. Sometimes simply being annoying and difficult to deal with is enough of a resource. Another way to think about position 3 is position 3 often takes the farm that the position 1 doesn't want to risk taking. Imagine there's a wave pushing deep into enemy territory. Technically, it's worth a lot of souls because troopers in the lane generate more souls than anything else on the map, but your primary carry walking all the way out there could be extremely dangerous. Your position 3 might be better equipped to take that wave because they're tankier, more mobile, or simply harder to punish. So your farm distribution might look something like this. Position 1 is your safe, efficient farm. Position 2 is your farm near potential fights and rotations, while position 3 is essentially your dangerous farm and creating a ton of pressure. This, in a sense, creates a much healthier map state than having 3 players fighting over the same safe jungle camps. Then you have your rotations. Position 3 can also be one of your most active early game players. Once their lane is stable, they can look for opportunities to rotate like a Calico or so forth. Maybe an enemy side lane is massively overextended. push your wave, rotate, force a fight, get a kill, then take an objective, then immediately return to collecting resources. The important thing is that rotations should have purposes. You're not wandering around hoping something happens. You're creating pressure because you have identified a specific opportunity that could benefit your team in a lot more ways than you might originally think. Now, positions 4, 5, and 6. Basically, your supports, initiators, and utility. This is where Deadlock's positioning system becomes especially interesting. Although there is no set-in-stone specific positioning system, this is one of the best ways to kind of categorize characters and how they determine what they want to do, what they want to play, and how they want to farm. But basically, to dumb it down, positions 4 through 6 generally represent the players who can provide significant value without requiring enormous amounts of souls. And that doesn't necessarily mean, traditional healers like a Rem or something, but a low economy hero might provide value through crowd control, initiation, healing, barriers, rescue abilities, debuffs, picks, vision or information, peel, area denial, or objective control. Heroes such as Paradox, Ivy, Kelvin, Dynamo, Doorman, or other utility-focused characters can potentially influence fights simultaneously without being your richest player. A Paradox doesn't need a ton of farm to stun somebody on the enemy team and swap them. A Dynamo doesn't necessarily need a ton of farm, of course if they have Unstoppable, to be able to ult the entire team and turn a fight. A Kelvin, or an Ivy, or even a Doorman don't necessarily need a ton of farm to be impactful around the map. Their abilities are inherently valuable. A stun is a stun, a rescue is a rescue, and an initiation ability can start a winning fight. And because these heroes don't necessarily require a massive amounts of farm to function, you can funnel more resources to your primary and secondary core or position characters. But position 4, in its own explanation, is what I like to call the greedy support. Position 4 is usually the highest priority farmer among your utility players. You could almost think of position 4 as a semi-core player. They're still expected to create plays and support the team, but they benefit considerably from having additional items. Maybe they need a specific active item to enable their initiation. Maybe another survivability item allows them to aggressively enter fights. Or maybe their hero simply scales better with souls rather than your position 5 and 6. So where there isn't an immediate play available, position 4 should absolutely be collecting resources. The difference is that they usually shouldn't be taking those resources away from position 1 or 2 characters, and we see this a lot, even in low and high elo all the time. To put an example, this could be like a Paradox or a Dynamo who needs to get, for a Dynamo, Unstoppable extremely quickly so his ultimate can't be interrupted, or maybe a Paradox to get a knockdown or a slowing hex or whatever the case may be. These are the small things you need to be looking out for. Then you have your position 5 character, which is essentially just your pure utility support. So position 5, it generally sacrifices more farm in exchange for being available to the team. They're much more likely to rotate with another player, help secure picks, defend vulnerable lanes, establish objective control, or protect the team's carries. Their build is also usually more problem-oriented. Instead of asking what items gives the most amount of damage, they're asking what does my team right now? And this is probably best suited with a character like Rem or a Page, a core support. Maybe the enemy has a hero repeatedly diving your carry. Buying something that helps protect them, maybe one enemy ultimate is deciding every team fight, buy an item capable of helping deal with it. Maybe your team struggles to initiate in some way. Invest into something that helps you start fights. Position 5 isn't necessarily trying to become individually powerful, they're trying to make the team more powerful overall. Whether it's buying curse, knockdown, slowing hex, focus lens, anything that is impactful like that can be greatly beneficial. Then you have position 6, which is essentially your lowest farm priority, the person on essentially life support insurance. Position 6 takes the philosophy of, farming even further. They're usually the lowest farm priority on the team, but low farm priority does not mean low impact. In fact, a good position 6 can sometimes be one of the most influential players in the entire lobby. Their job is to squeeze as much value as possible out of limited resources. Instead of clearing 3 jungle camps while their carry wins a round, they might give those camps away and spend that time positioning around an objective. Instead of pushing the safest lane, they allow their core to collect that wave. Instead of buying expensive luxury items, they prioritize cheap utility that immediately affects fights. They're essentially saying, you take the money, I'll make the play. And if the team understands that relationship, everybody benefits greatly. But why do positions matter? I would say the biggest reason this system matters isn't because, every Deadlock team needs to rigidly assign players position 1 through 6. It's basically there isn't enough safe farm on the map for everybody to play like a carry, if that makes sense. If 6 players constantly compete for the same waves in jungle camps, your resources become inefficiently disrupted and, you're not really getting any major items that can help propel you. Your carry doesn't hit their items quick enough, your supports spend too much time farming instead of creating plays, your lanes stop getting pressured correctly, and suddenly everyone has a mediocre amount of souls instead of having cleanly defined power spikes. A more organized team understands where resources provide the greatest return. Your position 1 gets rich, your P2 gets enough resources to become another major threat, your P3 gets enough resources to constantly create pressure, and your position 4 through 6 prioritize the items they need to perform their jobs. Again, a lot of people say that this game doesn't necessarily have positions, and I kind of agree to disagree. I think position 1 is super important, as well as position 2. So again, like a Venator in P1, it's in a character like a Pocket in position 2. And then you have your more utility-focused characters like a Rem, like a Paradox, like a Page, not needing as much money because they're buying items like trophy collectors, so they want to be in fights generating passive income. Now, I will say positions are really fluid, and what I mean by that is that your position isn't necessarily permanent throughout the entire match. Farm priority can change throughout. Maybe your position 1 had a terrible early game while your position 2 is massively ahead. It might make more sense to temporarily funnel resources into your position 2 and abuse that advantage. Maybe your position 3 character unexpectedly gets several kills and is one item away from becoming incredibly difficult to deal with. Give them some additional farm. Maybe your support desperately needs one more item before an important objective fight. Let them finish it. The system should be flexible. Positions aren't supposed to tell players, you're position 5, so you're never allowed to farm. They're supposed to answer, if 2 players want the same resources, who benefits the team more by taking it right now? But with all that being said, what is the simplest way to remember positions? If you want an extremely simple way of explaining all 6 positions, here you go. Position 1 is your scale. You are the primary late game carry. This are characters like Wraith, Venator, Geist, characters that like to shoot their gun, typically gun scaling characters because gun scales the hardest. Whereas position 2 is your, in quotations, kill. You are the second core who converts power spikes into pressure. Maybe a Pocket, maybe an Apollo, maybe something that, does a lot of extra damage. Where your position 3 essentially creates space. You pressure dangerous areas and force the enemy to react. This is characters like your Abrams, your Billy, characters that want to go in and be super aggressive. Your position 4 is essentially the make plays. You're the greedier utility player who still needs some econ to be able to enable certain items and so forth. Whereas position 5 is your enable. You help your cores succeed through utility and team-focused items, like a Rem, your support characters. Then you have position 6, which is your sacrifice. You operate on the lowest amount of economy while maximizing utility, and the entire system ultimately comes down to one idea. The higher your position, the more resources you're expected to consume. The lower position, the more value you're expected to create without those essential resources. Once a team understands that, Deadlock stops looking like 6 individual players farming and fighting independently and starts looking like an actual economy where every wave, camp, item timing, and rotation contributes toward a specific win condition. Now, again, just to reiterate and, look back, I do really want to emphasize that there isn't necessarily set positions in quotations. If you go back and what I talked about with the positions are fluid, it all just depends on the game state. Not every single game is going to be the exact way. Not every single character is going to be needed to farm a certain amount. Not one individual has to be able to farm. There's a lot of ways that, positions can flip around. I will say positions are generally the easier way to understand, how this game should, in quotations, be played. Not saying it's a perfect way, but can be played a certain way. But anyways, hopefully this video has helped you in any way, shape, or form to give you a little bit of a better understanding of, positions and thinking of a more team-oriented playstyle. And if it has, definitely do me a favor, hit that like button. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Going for 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year. That would be insane. But anyways, that's been Duck Films, and I hope you have a great and safe day.